Hi there, listeners. It's Jillian, your podcast host, and I'm just popping on before this episode to let you know that this conversation is regarding something that might be very pertinent to you right now. We're talking about treatment in this episode, and this specific conversation is regarding those who are in the midst of treatment and choosing, kind of discerning between treatments and trying to find a provider. And so if that's you right now and you would like to listen to this conversation, I invite you to do so. But the lovely Clare Kane just is giving you a little suggestion to maybe grab a piece of paper. And if you have any big feelings that come up during the episode, maybe just consider jotting them down and coming back to them later. Because sometimes this conversation can be really, really hard. It can be really overwhelming. And we're talking about really big questions and topics that might be kind of on the surface of your heart. So just know that we're here for you listeners. And I hope and pray that this conversation is one that will bring you maybe some clarification, or at least just direct you to the point of Christ, who loves you so much. And so do we. Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility. Hey there, welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I am Jillian, your host, and I am so excited to be having an important conversation today about treatment and discerning treatment and pursuing that and having some really good questions with some two lovely ladies that are not new faces to the podcast or new voices to the podcast, but I know you'll enjoy having them back. I have the lovely Caroline Gindhart with us today. How are you, Caroline?
I'm doing well.
Great. It's so good to have you. And we have returning to the podcast, Clare Kane. How are you?
I am well, thanks, Jillian. So delighted to be able to talk with both of you ladies tonight about these really important questions. It's good stuff.
Yes. Listeners, you may even be someone who is experiencing the midst of treatment and questions around that. There's a lot of pieces to consider when you are in the thick of treatment or trying to discern what kinds of treatment, or if you're thinking about taking a break or trying to nourish your marriage in the meantime. There's just a lot to it, and we are going to just take it one step at a time. So we have Caroline as a provider and is going to give us some direction from, of course, her scope and her perspective and more of the physical health, and as a provider who is being asked questions like these. And then we have Clare Kane, of course, who's going to just walk with us and support us in the mental health perspective to make sure that we are looking at ourselves as a whole person and the things we need to consider. So, Caroline, I'll start with you because my first question is, what questions should we be asking our provider when we're considering a new treatment or considering maybe changing a treatment? What are just some good questions that give us the knowledge that we need to have to make an informed decision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I am a naprotechnology nurse practitioner. And so the whole premise of naprotechnology is that infertility is a symptom of an underlying disease. It's not a disease in and of itself. So we try to figure out what are all those underlying conditions that are causing the infertility. And so much of the workup involves panels of blood work, looking for those underlying conditions, thyroid issues, PCOS, other hormone imbalances, ultrasound series to see if a woman is ovulating, hormone profiles to see what hormone deficiency she has, surgeries to look for endometriosis and fibroids and all other sorts of things. And so when I propose a treatment, it's because I have found an underlying condition that I think is contributing to the infertility. And so no medication or treatment comes without possible side effect, which a side effect is like something that's not like detrimental, but can just be an unintended consequence of medication versus an adverse effect, which is something bad that can happen that we really don't want to happen. And we need you to tell us if that thing occurs. And so generally, I try to tell patients the most common side effects, not always good at that, and like the red flags. And so that is a question to ask anytime you're started on a medication. What is a possible side effect? What can I expect? How long is it going to take to work? Am I going to see an immediate difference? Is it going to take a couple of cycles? What are reasons that I need to call the office or have cause for concern? So those are all good questions to ask. It's important that we give patients informed consent so that they know what they are saying yes to when they're saying yes to a treatment. So those would all be things to ask. And
I appreciate that. That's a good explanation of where the treatment even comes from. Like, why are we pursuing that? That's helpful. Claire, I'm wondering whether it's just from your experience with patients, or do you have any thoughts about maybe good questions for someone to maybe bring to their provider to maybe balance if they're already feeling maybe a lot of stress in their life, or they want to pursue, right, this sort of good physical health, and how might they be able to relate this to maybe a wider scope of their life? What might you suggest there?
I think some of the things that Caroline is talking about is that anytime you pursue any course of treatment, there's going to be ripple effects, right? Effects in areas of your life that perhaps you may not be aware of. And so that might be, in a sense, a vetting question for the treatment and for the clinician who's providing it, the provider, is what can I expect, not just for my body? Do people experience any mental health side effects to some of these medications? Because anything with hormones is going to have sort of a ripple effect, I shouldn't generalize, can have a ripple effect. Do you find that the patients you work with have this? Are there resources your office provides if I start to experience some of these mental health issues, maybe an increase of anxiety or depression? Do you guys have resources that you point to, clinicians in the area that you really trust as part of this process, right? And in a sense, those vetting questions then become a way to figure out, is this clinician thinking holistically about me as a person? Because there's so many people in our community who have encountered clinicians, often not NAPRO clinicians like yourself, Caroline. Unfortunately, it's like the norm with reproductive endocrinologists, where you walk in and you are de facto reduced to a pair of ovaries and a uterus malfunctioning, right? And I say this, that again, as a generalization, I think it is never the intent. People don't get into that kind of medicine, as we've talked in previous podcasts. Jillian, providers don't get into this field without genuine compassion, empathy, and a desire to heal, right? But unfortunately, some of the ways in which Western medicine, not NAPRO, is set up to facilitate healing ends up being very reductive. And so when you come in to talk about treatment and you come in to talk to a clinician, asking questions that might seem roundabout actually are really helpful for figuring out, is this the right person to walk with me? Is this the right office that's going to be really supportive? It might seem tangential, but are actually really essential to how this goes down, right? How this treatment unfolds. Those, I think, are important questions to ask.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I agree with that. And I think that brings me to my second question, that if there is, I think many in our community have expressed this kind of recently, when maybe they're in the midst of treatment, or maybe they're still in that discernment process, and they do have some fears about maybe it is the emotional stress, maybe even the financial burden, or they're really trying to, with their care team, to really figure out the best way forward. But they have a lot of stress about just bringing those questions to their provider and feeling like they have a safe space. And so, Caroline, in your experience, is there, as a provider, I think this might be interesting for our community, is there a way that's helpful for you to receive those questions? What is a way for you to help someone navigate all of those, kind of that wider scope?
Yeah, I think that a large part of the responsibility falls on us as providers. I try to create an environment, even say like outright, like I'm going to propose the kind of greatest extent of treatment that we can possibly do. But at the end of the day, like as the patient, you're in the driver's seat. Like this is your fertility. This is your one life. And if you're not comfortable with a treatment, then you need to let me know. I am not going to try to guilt you into a treatment. I am not going to shame you or judge you if you say, hey, that's way too much for me, or I'm not comfortable with this treatment. as a patient, you have all the autonomy in the world to say yes or no to a treatment. And unfortunately, some providers aren't good at creating that environment of informed consent and also of autonomy. But as the patient, you have all the autonomy in the world. And so whenever I'm like proposing a new treatment plan, I try to give the side effects. I ask them if they have any questions or concerns about it. And so a large part does have to come from the provider. Now, if at some point you're experiencing side effects or you find that a particular regimen is too stressful or is negatively impacting your finances, your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, then I would invite you to just bring those concerns to the provider and just not be afraid again that I'm judging you or going to guilt you into a treatment. It's completely for you to decide. And I'm going to try to work with you doing something that you're comfortable with, that's also safe, and also that I think will be helpful. And so it can just be a conversation starter. I am taking 20 supplements and I'm getting really exhausted with popping 20 pills a day. Are there some supplements that you think I could discontinue or that you don't think are completely necessary? Or even asking why am I even on this pill? I'm not even sure why I take it. And that's not trusting your provider. That is advocating for yourself. And that is important that you advocate for yourself and what your needs are and how you're feeling. I think as women, especially, a lot of us just bear through things and suffer through things and don't like to advocate for ourselves because we think that we're being selfish, whereas self-care is really taking care of the body that God gave you so that you can best love the other people in front of you. And that's part of that is advocating for yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. I think one, when you started, if anyone in the community just needs sort of permission or the encouragement that you are in the driver's seat, I think that's probably key to many frustrations that are happening between someone and their provider, that they're not quite sure how to, maybe they've jumped into the passenger seat or they've been placed there, or how to take that back and to say that, like you said, it's my life. This is our fertility. This is my treatment, my mental health, my physical health. I need to consider all of these pieces, and I can say yes, I can say no. And I can also just keep asking questions. I can get knowledge and research and education. And so that's really, so helpful. And Claire, I'm wondering, do you have any maybe tips for someone who is feeling like they can't get into the driver's seat? They're afraid to, because maybe they feel like they're challenging their provider. Like you said, Caroline, it's not a lack of trust. It's participating in your health journey, but that might be, I could see that being a little bit challenging for some. So do you have any thoughts about that, Claire?
Yes, I completely agree with Caroline that self-advocacy, especially for women in their own medical care, it's just a challenging area. I think often we're, as you pointed out, conditioned to acquiesce, where default is acquiescing to what the expert in the room is saying. And this is not to fault anybody, any clinician's expertise at all. That's the reason you're going to them, right? Is to be I have this issue, I need your expertise. But somehow I feel like, especially in all areas of medical care, but especially in area like infertility, where a lack of control is part of the grief. Something is happening in your body you cannot control, you cannot figure it out, and so our default disempowered. There's you're disempowered. And so one thing I often tell clients who are struggling with self-advocacy in medical situations, and this comes up a lot for clients, especially for female clients, not just in relation to infertility, just in general, is to script some stuff. Sometimes we'll work through it in session, but literally say, okay, sometimes just walking into that room is intimidating. When you have an expert sitting in front of you, it can be really intimidating. So what are your questions now? What are the things, what are your concerns? Literally write them down and draft through what would it be like to sit in front of that person and ask this. And you can even create a little flow chart. What if they say this? They're going to say this or say this. Okay, how do I handle it? And that can be very challenging, especially from my personal experience. I have encountered some very brash reproductive endocrinologists. I'll put it that way. Very brash. A lot of statements of, don't worry, we'll just get you a baby. And it's so hard to hear that. those with that kind of maybe demeanor, I hope that's on the wane. I really do, that there's a more collab take on this, even outside the wonderful NAPRO community, that like more just general clinicians working in this area take a more humanistic approach to this. But it can be really hard when you have someone brash in front of you with a great deal of confidence in themselves, and you're coming saying, this isn't working for me. That is real. That can be very intimidating for the person with the most practice in self-advocacy. So prep work is important, even if it's only 5 minutes in the parking lot, thinking, okay, I'm in charge. There's things that I can do, and there's autonomy I have. And I'm coming to this person for their expertise, but their expertise is not the end all and be all. It's my body. It's my being. It's my one life. And if this isn't working for me, and I get the sense somehow that this person is not hearing me, they're not hearing me, then the question becomes, is this the right clinician for me? Because I think sometimes people think if somehow, especially if you're in the thick of treatment and the thick of this grief, if they had the answers and if I had just been like quiet and followed along, right? What if that brash woman or man with their promises, if I had just gone through with it, even though it was grueling or it was taxing financially and emotionally, maybe it would have gotten me what I wanted. I think it's really important to sit and think through how you need to sit in the driver's seat for yourself, really. And to prep it, I often tell clients, like, role play it with your spouse. Like, you be the clinician, I'll be me. And then sometimes I have them flip it. You be the clinician and have your husband be you. Because that can often bring some interesting things to bear. But also realize, oh, to be this person, I'm having to put on a persona like I don't even like having on in behavioral rehearsal. Do I want to be interacting with this person on the regular, right? In the course of the most maybe important or one of the most important clinical and aspects of my life. So that's important. I'd say prepping to be in your driver's seat. Important stuff.
Yeah, Claire, I want to dig just a little bit deeper into something you said there, because that exact phrase has been shared with us a few times. I'm going to get you a baby. That has, and recently has come up. And listeners, for those who can't see us because you're listening, there was an eye roll collectively occurring when I said that by all of us here. So I want to ask both of you actually for your perspective on this. But Claire, do you have a potential sort of script, something that could be, of course, this would vary probably for each person, but if that's told to you by your provider, what could be a potential response to that? How could we respond to them, to that statement? Because like you said, it's coming from clearly a place of good desire to reach the goal that you want to reach, but it has a lot of complicated and likely unintended, but a lot of complicated consequences to that statement.
Yes. For those, again, who couldn't see, we said getting a baby, and Caroline is violently shaking her head because who says that anymore? But it's so sad and it happens often. So I'd say, let's say you're sitting in front of your clinician and they say very brashly or very offhand. Most of the time I've heard it, it's been very like off the cuff. Oh, we'll get you a baby. Don't worry. Literally, I've had that. Don't worry, we'll get you a baby. And then I remember being in like the premier reproductive endocrinologist in New York City, right? I got not dragged down. I think I dragged my mom down there when I was about 22, right? And I was like, okay, we'll see this guy. Maybe he has something different to say about my condition. And he could not have been more offhand. Don't worry, we'll get you a baby. Don't worry. And I said, I'm Catholic. I'm not really open to those kinds of things. I have so many Catholic clients. Don't worry. So many Catholic patients. And I'm like, oh, look at you doubling down on the shaming and the casual utilitarian framing of a baby. Holy cannoli. We got two big things going on, right? So my thought would be this. You're sitting in front of this person, they say that. I would literally take a breath and think, what is my window of tolerance for this right now? No joke. What is my window of tolerance?
So good.
Is my window of tolerance saying, I hear you. Can you talk to me about how you hope to bring that about? Talk to me about how you hope to bring that about. That's if your window is real wide, right? You slept well, you're feeling good, no other stressors in your life, and you're feeling, I'm going to be frank, charitable in this moment. Then, right? But if you're not, my thought would be, and I said, this is the person, thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your time. I won't be back. And if there's a question about why, then be like, it's because unfortunately your answer was pretty casual. I'm well aware of the success rate and the failure rate of some of these protocols. And I'm aware of what's at stake for me. So I'm going to say goodbye and thanks. Thanks for your time.
I can see the benefit of scripting that as well. To practice it, make it almost, hopefully, that script would never need to be used. And but to have that sort of in your toolbox. Caroline, I'm curious to hear a little bit of your thoughts as a provider about that statement, and just what do you think about that?
Yeah, don't believe anyone that tells you that, because I know infertility treatment is 100% effective, and I'm not the one who creates life. It is the husband, the wife, and God. So I cannot create life. So that's not really up to me. My job is to figure out what's causing in the infertility, and to the best of my abilities to propose treatment and institute that treatment so that we can help to lay ground and correct these underlying issues so that husband, wife, and God can bring forth life. But I don't make babies. That's not what I do. And so that's too much pressure for anyone to take on themselves. And that's not a responsibility of a provider to bring forth life. I know there's IVF, right? And so it's put us in this place of God where we can put a sperm and an egg together and then create life. But we don't have that much control.
That was so well said. I hadn't even really thought about it from that perspective. You can't even do that. That's not even your scope. You can't do that. And that just puts an end to it, let alone all the other messiness about that statement. But it's just, don't say it because it's not true. And thank you, ladies, for sharing that, because it's been coming up more frequently in conversations, which is, I think, a bit surprising, but it's good to address that. And I think that will be helpful. I want to switch gears a little bit to talking about maybe not so much a brashness, but when we find good providers, they are often very busy. Because they are good, people know that, and they are going to them a lot. And that's a beautiful thing. But something that we've been hearing from the community is that my provider is just too busy, it feels, for me to ask all my questions and concerns and go over all these treatments or maybe the side effects or et cetera. And what, Caroline, might you say to that patient if maybe they were your patient and they felt like you're so busy? What might you encourage them, or what might you say to them if they're feeling that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I'm first going to say is to in no way try to pit patient against provider or anything like that. But just so that I think it's important for people to understand what our day-to-day looks like. I have a completely full schedule of patients all day. Every slot, there's a patient. I have a half hour for lunch, but otherwise there's a patient in every slot. And I'm ordering tests on every single one of those patients most of the time. And so then I have an inbox that I have to review those results. And then people are calling in and then have to review that. And that's all in between patients while trying to write notes. And so many times I'm staying hours after, or sometimes coming in early so that I can get everything done. So we have a lot. There's a lot of shortages in healthcare and pressure from overlying health systems with how many patients to see and things like that. So yeah, we have a high degree of burnout and full schedules and things like that. So if you're calling in and feeling like your concerns aren't being addressed, one, I would just say understand just that perspective. But also some practices aren't set up well to just handle the complexity of fertility treatment. It's something that's very complex, and a lot of people have side effects, and they're calling in to schedule testing and get ultrasounds done and hormones done, and calling with positive tests, or calling because they're bleeding in pregnancy or whatever. And so our practice luckily is set up where we have fertility nurses who are our front line and take those calls and answer patient questions. And if it's something they can answer, they come to us. And so that's like the best practice model, but a lot of people don't have that. And so I would ask, if you feel like you're not being heard, ask what is the best way to get in contact with you, and what is the best way to have my questions answered. Is it through a phone call? Is it through a portal message? Is it through scheduling a visit? Many times if a patient has a long list of questions that I want to answer everything that they are like asking, I'll say, schedule a quick telemedicine visit and we'll go over those questions so that they don't feel like they're not being heard. Because sometimes it can be difficult to give the response that a patient deserves to their concerns with a phone call when I'm like seeing patients and doing a million other things all at once. So many times I would reassure patients that it's not because of like lack of care on the provider's part. It's that we are very busy and we want to give them like the time that their questions deserve. So if I'm not answering it right away, it's because I don't feel like I can give them like the best answer at that moment in time. And so that's probably what I would say to that.
Those questions are so great. And I'm just going to add a personal one that I tried that seemed to help. I had started scheduling appointments just whenever I could, morning, afternoon, just whenever they fit. And I was noticing like I'm not working. I'm coming with a whole notebook of questions and I may be getting one or two answered. And I know they're not intentionally trying to like sweep me out. They have more patience, but that's how it's feeling. And so I had asked, like, when would be the best time of day? I have a list of questions here. When is there a better time of day to schedule this? And my provider said, I think if you scheduled the last appointment, I know you're coming, I'm going to give you all that time. And so it went from like maybe a 10 or 15 minute appointment to like an hour with the provider to just get them all answered. And so I love the idea of advocating in that way and just asking what's the best way to do this, to be collaborative with your provider, because they do have good intentions. And especially if you love your provider and you're really trying to just speak with them, I think that's so helpful. Want to take that a step further and maybe widen the scope too, I think, at the same time. So if someone they have a regimen, a protocol that they're following, and they're feeling conflicted between, yes, I want to do this and I want to do it as best I can, but feeling maybe I forgot something, right? Like it just happened that I forgot, this supplement or this thing I didn't do, or I was at a work party or a birthday party and I like ate the thing I wasn't really supposed to be eating because I am, on this particular diet. And there's a lot of what we've experienced is this overwhelm that like we have to stick so closely to a regimen because that's the only way that God will answer the prayers if I follow this so strictly. And if we take a break, I can't take a break, or I can't pause, or I can't give myself a little space to do something maybe I enjoy that I haven't done in a while, because of course that quote unquote would be the month that this would have happened if I just hadn't done that. And I'd like to hear from both of you on this kind of perspective. And what would you maybe say to a patient, Caroline, who is really feeling like and maybe it's a control piece too. I have to do this because this is the only way. What might you say to someone who's in that position?
Yeah, I think like the first word that came to mind as you were speaking was the word like balance. I try to be like really balanced when I talk to patients, because I will recommend certain diet regimens because they do make a difference in our hormones or ovulation. But I always say it has to be something that you feel like you can do with your lifestyle. Take it like one step at a time with a diet change. And in no way do we want to contribute to disordered eating patterns, especially as women. A lot of us have struggled with our relationship with food. And then I'll have patients that tell me, hey, I'm going to Italy for vacation. And if they're on like a diet where they're trying to restrict carbs, I will literally say, please eat all the pasta and drink all the wine you want. Like, forget that you have insulin resistance. Please do. Please pretend that you don't have it and go do the thing. Because like you will drive yourself crazy if you're like in Italy and you're not eating the mounds of pasta that are there. Like, you should enjoy the things that God gave you. And all in balance though, right? Because those things like changing your diet can make a difference, but it can't come at the expense of you like enjoying something beautiful or sharing something with someone. And so I think there is definitely that feeling of like control, because with infertility, you do feel very out of control, as we discussed before. And so there are things that we tend to do to try to like gain that control back. And food is one of those areas that we can feel that. And so, too, when I talk to someone about taking a break, for example, I always tell patients it's like discerning between two goods, right? Good discernment is discerning between two goods. There's the good of wanting a child, but there's also the good of taking care of your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual health. And so God is going to bless good discernment. If you talk to your spouse and your provider and you're praying and you feel that like looking at the situation that the best thing for you to do is to take a 3-month break, that's not giving up. It's making a good discernment that right now, whatever aspect of my health or relationship is more important than the intense fertility treatment that I'm doing. And it's not to say that God can't bring a baby during a break. He can bring a baby whenever he wants. And sometimes he does bring a baby through a break. And so it's not, God isn't up there saying, oh, I was going to bring a baby next month, but you decided to take a break. That's on you. You made a bad decision. No, God honors good discernment. And he has as the author of life, he's going to bring a baby during intense treatment, or he's going to bring a baby during break. He can bring a baby any of those times. And so sometimes it just, involves a little bit of giving that control over to him and trusting that he's going to use that time as a time of fruitfulness. I have never had a patient that ever came out of a break and said, wow, Caroline, I really regretted that. That did nothing for me. 0 patients have said that to me. I can't say that about a lot of things, that 0% of people say that, but that's one of the things, because there's always some fruit that comes from it.
I love what you said about discerning between two goods, that it's not there's no negative in caring for yourself in whatever way, whatever shape that looks. Claire, what would you maybe say from the mental health perspective when, we're worrying that God won't act if we aren't doing things quote unquote perfectly within this protocol?
Yeah. First of all, Caroline, that was such a fabulous answer. I felt really ministered to in that answer. So beautiful. Everything a real statement of like encouragement. And I feel like it's like the antidote to fear, right? As if you're discerning, you're like entering into the Lord's love for you and being an active participant in how he wants to love you. And sometimes that takes the shape that feels less like I'm in the driver's seat, right? I'm going to just allow him to do. And I was talking with Anne today, the wonderful head of the chief mama of Springs in the Desert today. And I was saying, reflecting on these questions, what comes to mind is that mindset of, unless I do it perfectly, it won't happen. Unless I do it, and if I stop doing what apparently is maybe going to work, he's not going to give it. Somehow, gift and task are in the wrong order. They got flipped, right? Because every faculty we have, spiritual, physical, mental, is both gift and task, right? So fertility is very clear. Like, we are given the gift of it and then the task of caring for our fertility. But it is gift first. And we put the cart before the horse when somehow like that perspective, it's like our ethos shifts and all of a sudden we are focused on the task such that we fear if we don't perform it perfectly, we're not going to be given the gift. And that is like a poisonous way to look at it. And often I think it becomes that people can like accidentally tip over into that because we're so afraid we won't be given it. And we long for the logic. Why hasn't this happened? It must because we come up with these really maladaptive syllogisms, like I'm not being given the gift because I didn't do it. I didn't do the thing. I didn't do the diet. I didn't do the regimen. If I stop trying to do it, I won't be given this gift. And Oftentimes that's because it's very scary to turn and face the grief and the question of why haven't I been given it? Why isn't it yet? Why not this way? And so to anyone who's listening to this, who's hearing this and thinking maybe that's where my mind has gone, where maybe somehow my heart has started moving into this period of trying to care for my fertility and somehow slipped into the logic of if I don't do it right, it's not going to happen. I slipped into the logic of fear, because that's what that is. It's a logic of fear. Like, just be encouraged. It's not because you've done something wrong. It's because this is really hard. And grief is hard. And grief doesn't mean it's the end of anything. It's just the space where your heart is. Oftentimes that taking a break is literally a time to just let your heart heal and put the horse before the cart again. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. Wait, not even the way it's supposed to be. It's the way your heart will be able to manage this journey and emerge more whole, more sure of his love. However it unfolds, however your fertility journey unfolds, it's not going anywhere with the cart first, right? With task first, with I need to be perfect in this first. It will not go anywhere. And it can be very destructive for your sense of self, for your sense of your body. You can start to feel very disconnected from your body and very disconnected from the people in your life, like your spouse. It can be very poisonous for marriages.
Thank you for that answer. That's also, I think, a helpful visual sometimes to get a visual to see, like, what is my brain doing and how can I reorder it in that way? And yeah, that's really helpful. Listeners, if you are in the space where you're pursuing treatment, discerning treatment options, you're looking for a provider, maybe you're struggling with your current provider, I pray that this conversation will give you some encouragement and some empowerment and hopefully some helpful practical tools to help you on that journey. And if you, the listener, someone who is at kind of the place where you are discerning taking a break from treatment, that you feel like this is a time to pause, stay tuned, because next week we're going to talk about that. And we're going to walk with you no matter where you are on this journey. And we have two lovely women, so insightful women, who are going to join us for that again. So thank you, Caroline and Claire, for diving deep into this conversation. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely a pleasure. Always.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie.
Of course. Listeners, we will see you next time on the Springs in the Desert podcast. Know that we're praying for you. If you're needing any additional help, please reach out because we have resources. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.